Welcome to Dear Grandchildren, a Tracker's Tale. I'm Michael Douglas, your guide on this journey into the heart of nature and the wisdom that it holds. Here, we blend the ancient skills of survival, tracking, and foraging with modern insights to help you reconnect to the wild within. In each episode, we'll explore timeless practices, share life-changing stories, and discover how the natural world can bring you mindfulness, resilience, and purpose. But this podcast is more than just a show. It's a community. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcast, where you'll find exclusive content, question and answer sessions, bonus tales. For those seeking a deeper connection, explore our workshops and experiences, or even bring me to your community for an unforgettable adventure. Now, let's step off the trail and into a possible nature experience that could change how you see the world. Let's begin. So, in the beginning of my children's experience on this planet, I immediately did everything I could to get them to be present, not shock them or instill fear or uncertainty, although sometimes accidentally that happened. And I'll get to that in a bit. But when they would cry, I would immediately take them outside. And if they didn't notice they were outside because they were so watery-eyed and emotionally overwhelmed, 3 to 6 months, I'd go, and they would immediately stop. Right? So tapping into that primal sense of survival, that genetic coding that's already in there while we develop in the womb, to get them to be online and present. Now, as soon as that happened, their eyes would get wide, like they couldn't control this reptilian response to gasping and looking. And as soon as that was triggered, I'd smile and look at them and then point to something colorful or maybe the wind moving until I was sure they were engaged in something in that direction. It didn't have to be what I saw. They only had to be engaged in the environment. So awareness as a vehicle toward health and recovery, instead of awareness as a result of getting shot at or being in a car accident or some other form of triage. Nature hands us these lessons, pain and pleasure. If we hone our skills, our craft, whatever your craft is, it doesn't matter if it's martial arts, crochet, auto mechanics, interpersonal relationships, legalese, who knows? But as you align your craft towards your passion, what really engages you in life, and as you become more of a full and more effective you, the idea of awareness being stymied at the foundation of how did others do it here and what are my survival needs is almost an insult. It's certainly restricting, like underwear that's too small. And you want to grow into something more, the fullness of you. So, a brief recap from our last podcast. Rooting yourself in your physical awareness by pushing the physical awareness, your wide-angle vision, and looking at dead spaces and noticing your focal points and what you tend to gloss over in new environments, listening for the silences 3 miles out in all directions so that you can hear every sound. If I'm listening for bird calls, I might miss the jet airplane or the car that drove by or the house cat that's stalking in the leaf litter 30 yards behind me. Because I'm paying attention to where the bird feeders are, I might even miss the person who's walking up behind me with my water bottle that I forgot. Feeling the weight of your clothes while simultaneously feeling the pulse moving through your veins and arteries. Seeing if you can sense your heart beating in your feet as they press against the earth, or the shift in your body weight forward to back as your lungs fill with air and then release rhythmically. While listening to the silences, while in wide-angle vision, while noting dead spaces and focal points, until you can't think because it's all experience. You are wrapped in the moment, in the present. That's just the beginning. And people meditate as an end game. Like that's the goal, is to be blissed out. No, bliss is the workshop. Your workshop begins with being present and in that state of what? Joy, thankfulness, appreciation. It's more of an emotive state than a wordy state. How's that? And then we bring our logical mind to bear to anchor us in what other humans for the last 2,000 years to present did in order to thrive here. My vocabulary is intentional, not survive. If you aim to thrive and you're off a little bit, you're still doing okay. And now, in this moment, what is this landscape sharing with me with regard to where I could put shelter and be comfortable against the wind, the heat of the day, the approaching weather that I just noticed because the question was asked about shelter? See, it opens up things that way. When you have questions in your mind and your emotive state is connected to your physical awareness tools, you start to feel the approach of a storm. And it's not just a shiver. Oh, it's a sense of, how much time do I have before it starts to rain? Which direction is the wind coming from? So at least I'm out of the wind if I can't keep dry. Where's the warm spot from the half day of sun that I can lean against while I craft my thatched whatever, blanket, sleeping bag, protective cape out of these grasses? So now we're going to move into beyond the grounding. We're secure in our life-sustaining level of awareness because we've married what our species has done for as long as there's recorded time on this landscape based on what we know. The imaginative process that fills in the gaps of fact puts our awareness tools to include our brain in a space of noticing these things above all else. And when that happens, we increase our survival ability, our ability to flourish even many times over than if we were waiting to be a victim of happenstance, responding to stimuli like school bells after 13 years of programming. Now that we're proactive and engaged in our environment in a manner that's perpetually improving our situation, we can have fun with it. Now let's look through the eyes of a child or a scout. What's the difference? A child uses play to learn their craft, and a scout does the same. But a scout's ultimate mission is to serve their people. We're not trying to be destructive Sith Lord woods ninjas bent on harming others and instilling fear. That part of us motivates us to be the best person we could be. It still resides in there, but when it comes out, it means we failed. We use it to fuel that ability to develop our higher selves. It never goes away. You know, the difference between a weak person and a kind person may not seem all that different to the untrained eye, but a kind person comes from a place of strength. They will give their space to somebody who needs or wants it in their flailing grief so that they can better support that person while they're hurting. They see the person, not the hurt. A weak person will see the hurt and take it as a threat because they too are either hurting or empty or beaten down. A kind person comes from a place of strength. Don't take my kindness for weakness is a saying that should be listened to. And if you can internalize that saying, hey, don't take my kindness for weakness. You have given yourself permission to be strong and kind. And then other people will respect you for it. It's a phase that we go through. It's a transition from that adolescent, conquer the world, bath towel as a cape as you jump off the furniture and accidentally poke a hole in the sheetrock ceiling with the broom handle sword. That level of energy evolves into something more dangerous and insidious if left unchecked. We need cool uncles and aunts with battle scars to remind us of how sacred peace and the quality of life is for us. And that if we kill something, we can't reawaken it. That if we harm somebody in a relationship, it takes decades sometimes to heal, if at all, and to check our passion against our wake. For me, with my children, it was birds, bird language. I would see them get mad. You know, that 2-year-old expression of banging your head on the kitchen floor because you didn't get a cookie. I'd give them bird seed and they'd have to go to their little chair underneath the bird feeders until the anger left them and the birds felt comfortable enough to land on them. You know, I didn't have an instruction manual for raising children except for what I learned and how I learned from the people who mentored me. And in turn, as I worked with my children on these things, I got to see through the eyes of a mentor. And man, it works so much better than yelling and spanking and all the wooden spoon, all the things that I got. Now, I am not ungrateful for those things. They taught me resilience, self-reliance. And there were times where I did yell at my children, but that's because their lives depended on it. Getting too close to the outboard motor before, or sticking your finger in an outlet, or running into the busy parking lot without looking, life, death stuff. But when it happened, it was so rare, it was listened to. In the other direction, you open up empathy and awareness and the subtleties of birds alarming as conversation, as something as loud as somebody talking to you. You hear 30 yards away the scolding of juncos and chickadees because there's a house cat, a feral house cat working the rock wall on the other side of the house. And you know it's there because the pattern in that bird disturbance is a unique pattern that indicates house cat, not red fox or gray fox or coyote or other human. And even within a species, intention, hunger, body language cues will elicit a certain response. You could see it on nature shows. Lions laying underneath the big old baobab tree with full bellies and blood-stained faces. And in the background, there are zebra and gemsbok and gazelle, and they're all grazing. But then, a few hours later, a lion has a thought. Hunger. It's more of a feeling, isn't it? It's a feeling. Hunger. And as soon as that lion lifts its head to survey the banquet, it's confronted with an empty landscape. They've all managed to ghost away. Street smarts is what we call it in our human world because it's been almost extinguished. Our hunting culture is withering. But even hunters, the old hunters, they know where the deer are. Half of it's they don't want to tell you, but the other half is they can't. They just know where the deer are. They've been hunting them all their lives. They explain in vivid story, but when pressed, how did you know? I don't know. I just had this weird feeling and I stopped, moved away from the truck, looked at the landscape, and just knew they were going to be through that thicket of spruce. And there they were. Or something told me to look to my left, and there they were coming over the crest of that hill. So you can open yourself up to these things, but using your intuition isn't enough. It needs to have a skeleton to be hung on. And so part of that skeleton for me as a scout, I start with the fun stuff. The fun stuff when I was a kid. Now it's just stuff that makes me smile because it brings back all kinds of memories. And I love sharing skills with these young ones who still want to play hide and seek in the grocery store, in the clothing racks. When we were all little, we used to do these things, at least in my generation. So when I look at a place that I've never been to, whether it's a restaurant, an outdoor area like the Arboretum, I'm always looking for hides and the best way to approach without being detected and the best multiple ways to escape in traffic. Where, if I had to, would I move to for shelter, water, fire, and food without being detected? Right? I'll also look at a landscape to determine its mood. This includes humans, sure. If it's a fast-paced rush hour, the mood's going to be different at 2 in the morning. Mood can be lighting, space or lack of space, air quality. There's all these elements that evolve into a mood of a place. It could have been raining for 5 or 6 days and everybody's dismal, and then the sun comes out. And we just want to breathe it in. If we break mood down, it can be defined by pace, posture, topography, incline or decline, drainage, ground cover, soil and rock type, debris type, the amount or rate at which debris degrades over years and how you can count through the years until it's soil. All of these things demand that we pour our senses into them, and they may seem trite and senseless and silly, but they're actually quite useful. Who's going to kick around in the dirt to see how long it takes for a leaf to rot? Me. Because if that soil's acid, I'm not going to put metal pipe down there for an exhaust for a rocket stove. It'll eat away in less than 2 weeks. But I will plant blueberries there. If that soil's wet, I'm not going to put shelter down here. These big, luxurious leaves are apparently from a moisture-loving plant that likes to rot quickly. And I'm fooled here because instead of granite like my home turf, apparently this is chalk. And the water just melts right into the soil and gets sucked into the earth. There's no worry of drainage in this place, which explains why that mansion is built in the middle of the bottom of a valley. Because in my neighborhood, it would be washed away. You see, understanding from the ground up is a system of awareness development. So yeah, what is the mood of the landscape? Is it full of tense body language cues of uncomfortability? Did something happen just before you arrived, or is it because of you? Maybe something was being said that you shouldn't have heard. Or maybe somebody was sharing a story that was sensitive to them and a healing was happening. Because that's going to dictate your next move, isn't it? Your empathy bubble should always be at least in line with your bubble of disturbance, lest you not be aware of anything and everybody be aware of you. That's a prey animal that's not long for this world. Now, as a scout, we have a saying, the prey has the advantage. Without prey, there'd be no predators. So there always has to be an advantage handed to the hunted. Becoming the hunted doesn't mean coming from a place of paranoia either, or fear. In fact, it's like playing tag and the world is your playground. And at some point you notice that the people who run around to get away from everybody are the people everybody notices. Once you start to slow down and blend in a little bit, you don't have to work so hard at being invisible, and it's kind of fun. And as an invisible entity, you notice way more opportunities, more options, more choices. So understanding mood, pace, and posture isn't just about the woods or the city. It's about the banquet, the event, the wedding, the business meeting, the day-to-day grind in the cubicle world. Noticing the dynamics between people as they're pushed and pulled through their landscape helps you to determine your own personal engagement on your own terms, rather than being reactionary all the time. And then we get into the actual physical landscape. Topography. Higher is drier. And then moisture sinks to the bottom, carrying with it scent until it's heated and rises throughout the day through the evaporative processes. That is our water system, but it brings messages to those who use their nose. Now, we don't use our nose, but the deer do, which fill our freezer, and so do the coyotes. Drainage, ground cover for foraging, but also for trapping, snaring, edible, medicinal, plant purposes. Cordage making, soil and rock type for tool making, debris type for shelter building and insulation. You don't need to build a shelter. If you can stuff your clothing full of leaf litter to create a dead airspace, it may save your life. Scat and hair content of the debris. What animals move through here? What predators are marking their territory in this area that you wanted to build your shelter? Is it wise? The moisture form and content of the soil, clay, is going to stay wet for a real long time. And when it dries, it's going to be dense and rock-like. But it's also a great filter for water. And it's also a great tool to use as a water container or as a mordant to create a concrete for our straw survival cement or cob. Right? And we just keep moving through that Thanksgiving address, radiating from humanity through the earth into the water cycle and how water is expressed, water to plant relationships, plant to plant relationships, small plants, the carpet beneath the understory, the larger plants that make up the lower part of the understory. And then you've got the seasonal rotation of plants and the life cycle of each plant in that area, not just for food, but later on for medicine, and then fiber, and then food again as the next generation is sending down its taproots and turning starches into sugar in preparation for next spring. We need to have a connection that allows us the comfort and confidence of someone who could feed themselves year-round. If you want true peace, if you really want self-reliance, you need to have a deep sense of connection to your landscape. Or else you're always going to feel left out as an alien floundering on some foreign land, hopelessly dependent upon fill in the blank that you resent. I don't resent the landscape. Even when acorns don't come, I resent my choices, not being more aggressive with the blueberry harvest to make up for the loss of acorns, or the rice harvest, or the alewives in the spring, or the self-discipline not to eat and devour all the maple sugar and syrup that we made, or the lamentation of giving up so easily on honeybees because they don't make it through the winter, or other hives from commercial hives take over. Why did I give that up? Now I need it more than ever. And each year I sharpen and hone my craft because of those interactions with the landscape and my own moods and my own choices. I'm tracking me as I track the land because we're part of the same system. Right? Utilitarian plants available. Where are the plants that will create insect repellents? Cordage for my bow drill or my hunting bow. Bow making woods. Well, that gets later on when we get into trees, but you get the idea. Then we get animals, other animate beings, not just animals, but mosquitoes. Did you ever notice some days are full of mosquitoes, others there's hardly any? It has to do with moisture and evaporation as well as wind and temperature. Mosquitoes will go into ground. They'll hit the ground cover and stay damp in the leaf litter until it's safe enough to come out and they don't dry up like little Bako bits. I wish they would. I wish they'd get caught off guard and a cold snap would freeze all their little bodies, but then that would crash so many other species that we couldn't even fathom, and the ripple effect would be devastating. So I choose to look at mosquitoes now as guardians of the forest. They weed out those without the constitution and passion to want to find a real connection to something that is meaningful for themselves, and they don't want to earn it. Because you have to earn it to make it meaningful for yourself. If you don't earn it, it's not meaningful. And the mosquitoes bring you to those places. That's why our scout classes are done at the height of mosquito season. That's not a coincidence. I want people to try to stalk on each other without getting caught and move slow and motionless for hours sometimes at a time to avoid detection while the mosquitoes are tearing them a new one. Because in that space, you learn self-discipline. You learn what's important. You dig deep for the meaning of why you're doing things. And if you have to make up that meaning to get through it, you've learned a degree of self-control and self-discipline that few will ever touch upon. We move our awareness from those animals that create relationships with us at a distance, like the geese in their migration, or the distant call of the loon telling us of water. Or red-winged blackbirds do the same thing, but this time it's water with cattail, which is a whole different resource, right? Or animals that allow you to see them, like the deer. For me, it's the deer and the weasel family, and the coyotes. I get to see them all the time. I hardly ever see bear. I don't think I've seen a bear in the wild, only in, rescue situations. I have seen their tracks fill with moisture. I've heard them chomping their jaws. I knew one was hunting a fawn in a field and heard it just crash back to the wood line. Never seen it. Some people see bear all the time. People I wouldn't think had a chance of seeing bear. Obnoxiously loud, in your face, alpha, fresh out of the city, former police officer. They see bear all the time. I'm like, how can you see a bear? Quiet's not in your nature. And bear are masters at bird language. Bear let them see them. For some reason, maybe they think they're relatives. Maybe they admire this brash, crazy human. Who knows? But start looking at those relationships you have with animals, wild animals. Maybe you're a hunter. That deer has shaped you. That deer has made you sharp. Those deer are smarter than trained German shepherds in many cases, and you had to rise to the occasion to crack that code. That deer was your mentor. And so a hunter, a seasoned hunter, has a respect for that animal, for where it's brought them. There's a connection there. It's a heartfelt connection. When you eat that meat, it's meaningful. It's more meaningful than any steak you could buy. There's a story attached to each kill, and it's a sacred story. We would probably not hear that word come out of a hunter's mouth in Maine because there's a stoicism, a firewall, if you will, that protects those deep feelings. I use the F word from the rest of the world. We don't have those unless you're sharing hunting with your son or your nephew or your daughter. And then there's this understanding that there's something deep happening there. It's those things that ought not to be said that are sorely lacking in expression and thus need to be said. As I move my awareness out from those animate beings, I'm paying attention to the understory trees. We don't have sassafras this far north. Well, I do. I have two. Couldn't believe they survived the cold all these years, and they're not that big. But I have two sassafras trees because I grew up with sassafras, and I miss it. I mean, that's all. That was the only reason. It wasn't some lofty ideal of enriching the environment through a biodiversity scheme that would support some endangered turtle. It was, I miss my sassafras. Yucca is a valuable cordage. I have yucca on south-facing walls. It can't grow in the wild in Maine unless it has enough warmth, and it's growing like wildfire. And so, yeah, we can make yucca sandals and footgear and bow drill cord. Yucca has its own needle. It has saponins, so we can make a soap. It has delicious flowers. But I wouldn't know yucca if I grew up in Maine all my life. And the only reason I know yucca is because I grew up in the Pine Barrens, where yucca and prickly pear exist, where midden piles of clamshells from the Lenape who went to the coast to gather the food and bring it to the village where the elders waited inside that pine area that I grew up in. And those scarred shells from the fire still remain, as the migratory roots do too, through the high bush blueberry and mountain laurel. Where the sand tracking made tracking something you could develop into a literary skill. Here, it's sign tracking, but you don't need to go any deeper because the food was so much more bountiful in these cultivated forests. Butternut, black walnut, witch hazel, and hazelnut. Beech, oak, wild rice. And those are just the plants. The migratory fish calendar would keep you busy from the gill nets under the ice to midsummer with the striped bass coming upriver and the salmon migration. I mean, fish racks along both sides of the Kennebec without putting a dent in the species. We can bring that back. It might take a few lifetimes. It was a multi-generational garden before things got scoured, and it's going to probably take a few generations to reclaim it as it grows back in. But doing so with discernment, you take care of the forest for the forest's sake, and then the forest takes care of you. Now think how exciting the potential is with all that we've learned in the last 500 years, coming back to that landscape with those more ancestral eyes and attitudes and approaches. With your increase in awareness, the major canopy trees hold more meaning for your grandchildren after you're gone. You start to cultivate those trees. You start to prune deliberately those branches that are sucker branches so that the fruiting bodies can be more rigorous and more bountiful. We look at limb lean and lean patterns to see where those solar panels are getting the most sun and where they're challenged. Tree diseases and scars, so we can problem solve and isolate and create more hardy versions. The emerald ash borer and the woolly edelgid right now are wiping out, respectively, ashes and hemlocks. So we've planted basket willows to replace pounding the brown ash into pack baskets. We're going to weave now our pack baskets and leave those few brown ash in our swamps for the next generations to deal with, if there's any at all, because they're going through a lot of stressful times. We read the distribution of trees and shrubs so that we can understand soil type and progression. What's happening in this forest now, and where is it heading in 20 years? The poplar is going to be outshaded and outgrown, which means the grouse is going to crash in population unless we start creating more shade tolerant and maybe some more openings and edge areas so that it's not such a crash. Let's wait for a nice, easy transition by planting beaked hazelnut and berry-producing cane plants like black raspberry on the edge. As the spruce grouse declines, or the ruffed grouse declines, the turkey will start to come in. And with the turkey, the deer. And with the deer, the coyote. And we know we're on the right track when we have a good ratio of coyote to bobcat to fisher moving through the area, that the area can support a number of porcupine and snowshoe hare are abundant, but so too is the occasional raccoon. We have a good mix of old, dead, and dying trees as well as young ones coming up for the pileated woodpecker and the denning sites of animals like possum, skunk, and raccoon. We intentionally make brush piles, cutting trees in February, so that the buds of those maples that we cut to season are going to feed the snowshoe hare in the worst time of the year, the culling time from February through early March, where they're trying to eke out an existence enough that they can make babies in the spring. We're reading the air pressure and its fluctuations, wind direction at various elevations, where the places are that get direct sunlight and how they respond to the frost or the dew, as opposed to the shade or the dappling patterns through time, and how those shadows of trees sweep across an area, not only to age the tracks, but to entice those herbivores to come out and feed under the cover of shade in the protection from hawks. We look at seasonal weather patterns through systems because it helps us to know how much food is coming from the late frost that kills those emergent buds, telling that there's not going to be any apples this fall, right? In the early spring, we get this news. To the shift of a southerly wind bringing warm air, or a northerly wind, reminding us to park our cars so the windshield faces south, making it easier to scrape the ice. We look at energy transferring through all of those systems, from the soils, through the water, into the herbaceous plants that draw those other animate beings out or away, pushing and pulling them like a salad bar on the move through the seasons. And in the movement of those animals, their scat and the seeds they drop, creating a successional forest. It's not just the beaver that changes the landscape by building dams that create lakes and ponds that become fields and young forests. The insects wipe out entire species at a time, with slow recovery, if at all, or another species coming in to replace them. And the weather is indicative of change. It's all indicative of change. It may not seem like change to our perspective because we're a fleeting wink of an eye in comparison to an oak tree. So reading the energy moving through systems and all of these mentioned categories is tracking. It's not just following footprints. In fact, if you develop your awareness to a point where you're picking up on all of these things simultaneously because you've been using a system of first humanity and my needs, and then radiating out through the earth into the waters, the topography, the herbaceous plants, the living beings, the trees, the things of the sky, all the way out to whatever, great mystery, whatever you want to call it, things you forgot. And you constantly revisit that idea by plugging in your awareness over time. you'll get to that place of being a tracker, and you won't have to look for footprints. You'll know where the deer are. And the reason you know where the deer are is because you not only know where you are, you know who you are and why you're here and what you're going to be doing with the calories and time that you've been blessed with. And that's the value of awareness. It's so much more than situational. So get out there, change the world for the better. Have fun doing it, and don't get caught. Until then, see you on the trail. Dear grandchildren, A Tracker's Tale. If today's journey resonates with you, I invite you to share it with others who long for a deeper connection to nature and themselves. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts for bonus episodes, exclusive question and answer sessions, and more tales from the wild. Your support through subscriptions, feedback, or simply spreading word keeps this flame of ancestral wisdom alive. And if you're ready to take the next step, contact the Central School at primitiveskills.com or email staff@primitiveskills.com to learn all about our workshops, experiences, lectures, expeditions, and how we can bring these teachings directly to you. Until next time, may your trails be clear and your heart full. Keep exploring and keep the fire burning.